It's a beautiful day today, and I think it's more planting on the agenda. There's a few things to go out today, and it's whether or not I hold off for the beans. I'm thinking I will. So the leeks, many of them have stood up this morning, which is good, and we've just got those last 4 feet to plant up, and in those is going the blue soleils, and I won't need as many as there are there, but a couple of cells full will probably do the job. This bed is the last of the small beds to be planted up, and it's a bit of a mix really. I'm going to put in the remaining celeriac, the prince and the monarch. There's a few of the long keeping onions which didn't go into the onion bed, and I think I'm going to plant those down the middle because they'll come along nicely. And there's just a couple of odds and sods onions there which I'll plant in. So that's going to be essentially an onion and celeriac bed. There's a couple of spaces dotted around which I'm going to get my head around to decide what I want to do. I've moved all of the spares into the cold frame, so we've got various brassicas there which are backups, quite a lot of lettuce. The marigolds will go out when I put the beans out, and there's the leeks from yesterday, and more lettuce and more broccoli, so plenty of backup. I can see me not needing a lot of that, but we'll see how we go. And I'm starting to think about hardening up the beans now, so the beans are coming out during the day. A lot of the plot holders have put their beans out already, although they've put screens up to protect them. And this weekend the temperatures are going to be okay, but there's forecast some quite strong wind, and I'm definitely going to wait till after that in hindsight. So there are my sunflowers doing nicely. There's a little group there I need to pot up, but the ones that I did pot up are doing well. I need to think about getting those either into the ground or, for the challenge, get one in a container. And this is the parsnips. As you can see, most of them now have 2 true leaves, and I think that's probably going to come out for a couple of days and just harden off a little, and then I'll be putting those into the bed as well. The potatoes now, the early ones, I've been putting out during the day and then finally leaving out overnight for the last couple of nights. You can see some flowers there, so they're not too far away from harvesting. And then into the polytunnel I've put the beefsteak tomatoes in their final position, and hopefully they will come on. The ones that I put out yesterday, or planted yesterday, a couple of the leaves are looking a bit weak, but I'm sure they'll recover. And update on the Great Pumpkin and Squash Challenge race. Nothing yet. Spare tomatoes, the beans and the courgettes. And I was worried that last night or yesterday these Berlotti beans, they took a hit. And I'm not sure whether it's heat damage or just because they were tender during the night. But either way, they're staying in here for a little while longer before I plant them out. And down here you can see my Winicky cucumber has developed a couple of leaves, and next to it, thanks to a neighbouring plot holder, I've got another cucumber that's looking much more vigorous, and that's called Succata, and hopefully that one will do the job for me. I'm certainly no expert on cucumbers. And then my tomatoes in their final position and really starting to grow now. I've been pinching out the early shoots of which there's been a few, but not too many. So, on with the planting. So I'm just going to use a small bowl of water for these leeks. And this is the Blue Soleils, planted on the 2nd of February. A bit of a squeeze. And there you are, all out in one go. I think I'm going to need 2 of these. And then that middle one looks nice and strong. Pop them into the water. Right, where they're soaking, just going to make myself a few more holes. Now I watered this again last night because, as I say, this was a very dry area following the kale that I had in here. So it's important to get a reasonably moist foundation for planting. I think this will be the last row because I do protect that first 10 inches or so for the net to sit in and a weight to hold it down. Right. Well, I watered these last night. They filled up. So I just opened some of them back up again. So Blue Soleils is a leek that I've grown before. It tends to be a little bit shorter, very similar flavour. I can't say I really can distinguish the flavour from Musselburgh, but I know that it fares quite well in this climate. So we'll open these up and give them a bit more. There we go. If you just break them up a little bit, it enables the compost to come out of the roots. And away we go. So, as I do this, I do my best to pick the larger of the leeks. That way I know I've got a strong start. And the small ones, I don't waste them. They'll go back into some compost. And I'm just working out what to do with those, but I'm warming to the idea that when the garlic comes out, I'll add another batch of these. You can't have too many leeks. It's so easy to cook with them, and there's a number of dishes that you can make that you can just freeze and store for the winter, which is fantastic. Right, I'll carry on planting those and then net this bed up. Well, today's a bit of a cooler day and I'm going to make the most of the lower temperatures. Still bright and dry, and I've decided that it's time to refurbish the front of the shed and probably one side. Strangely, this shed is really sound on the back and on the right hand side, but in the front particularly I've got some real problems, and it's not going to go another winter. And I've taken off a kickboard that's along here, and you can see how rotten it is in the base. This is sound, so it's really only the feather boards. Might have to do something with the trim. And these doors have absolutely had it. They were vandalised twice, and I'm going to need to construct a new door, I think, for the shed. And again, you can see how rotten these kickboards are at the bottom. They take the most of the moisture with everything running down. And here you can see where it's warped and come out of its sockets. So we're going to have to work out what to do with that. And when you go in the shed and look out, you get a sense of how many gaps and openings we've got, which isn't a problem during the summer, but certainly will be a problem during the winter. And the doors are really in a bad way. So, a bit of construction. I don't know whether it will all happen in one day, but we'll pick up the wood. And during this pandemic, wood collection is click and collect rather than go and find what you want. So I've measured up and worked out what I need. And I'm going to go with these feather boards, at least I think that's what I've ordered, and coat the fascia and reconstruct the front. And we'll see how we get along. This is quite an unusual compost maker for the UK. My next door neighbour was clearing the garden and decided they wanted to get rid of this and asked me if they wanted it over the allotments, and I thought, well, I'm sure I'll find somebody, but I thought I'd have a go first myself to see what it's like. So it's a tumbler aerobic composter, and you simply take the lid off, put your waste products in here and put the lid back on and tumble it each day. It's got a handle on it for assisting with the tumbling process, and the idea is that it accelerates how quickly the composting process takes. So I'm going to give it a try, and I'll find a space here, I think, next to the wormeries, and see if I can succeed with it, and we'll go from there. So wish me luck. So I've emptied one partially decomposed bin full of compost, and it did say when I researched this it's best to fill it, so that seemed like the best strategy. And it's on a bit of a slant, but that isn't a problem, and we'll give it a couple of tumbles. It's not easy to tumble, that's for sure. I guess there's a bit of weight in here. Oh, let's try it the other way. Yeah, that's easier. Well, give me some exercise each morning, see how we go. So I've decided that I'm going to plant these parsnips into this bed, and they've all got 2 true leaves now, so I think they're about ready to go. I need to be really careful with these. Everything you do with the planting process, you've got to make sure that you protect that single taproot, otherwise you'll end up with a root that's less than desirable. And these toilet rolls, they're quite flimsy, so I'm going to make sure that the hole that I put them in is just the perfect size. To do that, I'm going to use a bit of white piping, and I'm just going to make those holes all the way down the bed, and then drop these in and just make sure that the soil goes around them, give them a watering, and then hopefully we're good to go. They've been out for a couple of nights now and they seem to be coping really well, and that just leaves me to get on and plant them. There we go, all the parsnips in the toilet rolls in the bed. Now some of those holes that I made were quite deep, so I've watered well to make sure that they fill up with soil, and that will make sure that they don't dry the roots out. So that's a good sowing of those parsnips. Now there might be one or two casualties, we'll wait and see. But I've kept the 5 larger ones back so that if I do get any die off, then I can quickly replace one. And that leaves me just a little bit left of this bed, which I can decide what I'm going to put in. Well, that's our resident great tit, and she's feeding a number of chicks frantically, as is her partner, who's waiting in the bush. So I'm trying not to disturb them too much today. These are the doors that I prepared for the shed. I wanted to get these done before I added the cladding to the front of the shed. The doors are really very rotten and have been vandalised a couple of times, so I've made these substantially stronger with 2x2 strengthening bars and featherboard, which is quite long, and I've cut the first of the angled boards that go towards the apex. So I've left the right hand side of this door so that the featherboard's not attached. I need to be able to compensate for the fact that the shed's leaning over, so I'm hoping that that will enable me to adjust for that lean. Proof will be in the pudding, but I need a full day to be able to get the old doors off, replace the boards that the hinges fit into, then clad, and then put these new doors on. So quite a job ahead of me, but looking forward to it. Should make the shed that much more serviceable and a pleasure to use. Well, today I'm going to plant up some cuttings that I took. So the sagebush, which is in the chicken run, is not a very good looking bush. So I took these cuttings, which I put into a glass jar with some prepared water, and they've now rooted nicely. So I'm going to pop those on. So in terms of the prepared water, nothing particularly scientific. I used half a litre of water and I added just a tablespoon, no less than that, a teaspoon of hormone rooting powder. So it just made a concoction that I thought might stimulate root growth. And it certainly seems to have worked on the sage at least. I also took some cuttings of rosemary, and those too have rooted well. So I'm quite pleased with those, because growing rosemary from seed is a very long process, and a couple of cuttings like that rooted will save a very long time. And you may have seen I cut down a very old bay tree, and I took some cuttings of the bay tree, and they were a bit later than these two, and they've not yet rooted as far as I can see, but we'll give them time, because it would be great to get some rooted bay cuttings. So I'm going to mix up some standard compost, and I'm going to add this EcoThrive Charge, which boosts biology and promotes vitality. I've had this for a long time and I used it for seedlings, and I'm not convinced that it did an awful lot, but I want to use it. So you use 10 mils of this for a litre of soil, and you just sprinkle it on and mix it in, and that gives vitality, and if it works then that'll help these cuttings on their way. So I'm just going to mix that up, get it nicely mixed into the compost, and then just pot my seedlings or cuttings into these. I'll give them a good water first, and then we'll see what we can do getting those roots down into this compost, and hopefully getting a nice plant at the end. So I've watered those in, and this is a moment of truth. See what these rooted plantlets look like. Oh wow, yeah, they are really, really strong. That one's not managed to root, but those 4 have. Just to give you an idea, that's looking really good. So I'm going to plant some of these into some smaller pots, but I'm going to give at least one a really good chance with one of these bigger pots. I'm going to take out the lower leaves because I think they're just going to rot as I place them down into the pot, and press it down fairly firmly so I get a good contact. That's one. Put those back in there for a minute whilst I prepare the others. And now I'm going to do one of the rosemary. The root's not quite as strong on the rosemary, but that one's really quite nice. So we'll give him a go. Pop him down into the pot. Push it down nice and firm so that we get the contact. There's a bit of water running off the table here, so we'll just put that in. And there we have 2 good plants that have taken about a week to propagate, and from seed that would have taken an awfully long time. So I'm going to carry on with this process and use these propagations to increase my plant stock of these really good culinary herbs. And the bay, hopefully they'll root in the not too distant future, and I'll do the same process. You might want to try this at home. It certainly adds to your stock for no cost or very little cost. So whilst I was potting up, I thought it would be a good occasion to pot up these last few sunflowers. There's 4 in this little pot, and they're again a little bit root bound. So I'm just going to put them into the same compost with that invigorating charge additive. See whether that does anything to get them going. And there's a lot of root on these, so getting them quite deep and firming them in. And there we go. Last one. This has got the biggest root system. Yeah, they fit in there nicely. And they'll need potting up again if they get going. That one was potted up a little while back. Just gives you some sort of idea of how much vigorous they get when you pot them up. And that will add to our sunflower competition chances, which are probably quite low anyway, but it's good fun. So the time has come for the shed to have its makeover, and it's quite a lot of components, and it's either going to go really easily and the doors hang well, or they'll be a complete pain, and I won't know until I get them nearly up and understand what I've got to do to adjust to get them to work well. So that's the challenge, but it's all at once, I'm afraid, because you can't do half of this without doing it all. So, final look at the shed before the makeover. And these are the tough bits. I've got to take these out because they're fairly rotten, and without new pieces I don't think the hinges will hold up the doors well, and you can see the same goes here. So we'll see how we get on. So this is the before, and that's the after. Job done. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.